What up, guys? Johnny Page here, and today we've got an absolute treat. Today we're talking to Wes Bush. He's the author of the best-selling book, Product-Led Growth, and founder of ProductLed.com. He's coached over 300 SaaS companies and generated over $1 billion in self-serve revenue. Today we're going to be unpacking all of the different elements of what it truly means to be a product-led software company. So let's dive in. I'm Johnny Page.
I'm Matt Verleck.
And this is the SaaS Academy Podcast. Here, I'd love to hear from you. Like, if people aren't aware of who you are, what you do, you want to give us just like the 60 seconds or so rundown on who you are and how you got to be doing what you're doing every day?
Yeah. So I feel like most people know me as Mr. PLG. I know everything about PLG now. Still learning, still a student on it, but wrote the book on PLG. We have the summits on product-led growth. And what we also do is over the last kind of 8 years, just been working with B2B SaaS companies specifically. I've worked with sales-led companies, product-led companies. And I remember the first time I launched my freemium model, this is at Vidyard. I was like, oh my goodness, this is it. This is like a completely new way, much better way than what I was currently doing of like giving white papers and guides and stuff to people to download. I was like, people just want to try before they buy. And PLG really embodied that for me. So I've been hooked ever since. And if you got a free trial or something, you can try it. Love free stuff.
Nice. Wait, so were you behind the Vidyard? Were you behind the Vidyard freemium? What was the tool that you had for a while?
It was initially Viewed It. Now it's just Vidyard free.
Yes, I loved that tool. I used the hell out of that tool. And it was a fantastic tool for free.
Model.
and then one day we became very high paying users. So it worked out really well. I didn't realize you were the guy behind that. Very cool.
Yes, but I kind of left out the first part. I was also behind the free trial that was not successful.
Well, maybe that's a good place for us to start. Like, what'd you learn? One of the first questions I want to ask you is, we hear freemium and free trial tossed around a lot. They're not the same thing. And I think a lot of people a lot of companies that are sales led think they're doing product led when they launch one of those too. So you have this really awesome article on the website on free trial versus premium and which one's right for you. You want to kind of give us the Reader's Digest version of the difference between the two and how to know which one's the right fit for your company?
Yeah. So I'll take like an interesting stance. The model doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's really like, do you understand your ideal user, exactly what their user success is? Like, do you know exactly what they're trying to accomplish in their life? And then have you kind of bundled it down into three main groups of like these beginner problems, like everybody struggles with that stuff. Then there's the more intermediate problems, like most of the market struggles with that, but it's slightly nuanced still. And then there's the advanced problems, like really complicated stuff. So the advanced is usually like, hey, that's still sales led, or you got to talk to us or something like that. Some level of service there. And then there's like in between the intermediate stuff. That's really hopefully what people can first start off with their initial plan. And then beginner stuff, all those beginner problems, that's your free stuff. So however you can unpack it, whether that's a free trial, oftentimes it's not. It's like, hey, it takes people longer to experience that value or accomplish that beginner milestone. And so what we do is we get clear on like, what is that beginner milestone, that first strike where they feel like, I call it like, does your free model pass the Super Mario test? Or like you pick up that little flower and you're like, whoa, I'm bigger. I spew fire. I'm like, rah.
I love it. I love it.
That's the best free model. And it's like, if you can't pass that, it's not a good free model. And so you kind of work from there and then figure out, okay, which model makes the most sense? So that's how we kind of think through it.
Sweet. Okay. So it doesn't matter. It's also not just because you've got a product and you launch a freemium or a free trial, doesn't make you product led. Help unpack you get this beautiful image on the website. I'd encourage you, if you're listening, go to productled.com and check it out. It's right on the homepage. You have a picture of an iceberg. That's what most people think product led is. What is it really? Unpack the 5 other components of what it means to be product led.
Yeah, I can even share like the first video experience too with that free trial, because it ties directly into it. So when I was at Vidyard, we launched this free trial because everybody else was having one. We're like, oh yeah, let's do that too. It sounds great. So one of our competitors, Brightcove, they had like a free trial. We're like, oh, let's do that too. And so we just slapped on this 14-day free trial, and then we created the new offer, landing page, all that stuff, directed a lot of traffic to it. We found a lot of people signed up for this thing. This is what they want. But then when it came time to look at the conversion rate, it's like, no, that can't be it. Like, oh no, like it's a month in, like this thing's really not working. We're blowing money into this free trial. Like, what the heck is going on? The sales teams then they're like waiting. You're like, can we talk to these people, please? And like, sure enough, they did. They reached out, and like the only people that closed were the ones that sales talked to. So we're like, PLG didn't work. Why was that? And it's really like the top of the iceberg. Most people just focus on like your model and then your offer. So what did you promise people? And then the overall pricing, like, okay, we got to make that transparent. And so when you just focus on like those like really top level things, that's actually what the problem is we didn't think about how do we support PLG from the rest of the organization. And so we were just slapping on a free trial and didn't have any kind of support to make it successful.
Interesting. So what was the turn that made it? So first one bombs, sales team closes, comes in and plays cleanup crew. Yes. Like, what was the second iteration?
Yeah. So we had like at least one good learning from that, which was nobody was uploading a video. And so we're like, it's kind of weird. I mean, it's like 2017. It's not that easy to create a video. But in order to see the value in Vidyard, it was like you literally had to upload a video, put it on your marketing site, direct traffic to it, integrate it with your like Marketo or, big marketing automation platform. And so it was a big ask. And so we had to make that like loop really easy. And so we decided, okay, we got to have a Chrome extension, make it easy for somebody to like click, okay, good, I'm recording myself, send it to anybody. And then they could get a little notification that said, wow, Johnny Page, you watched 50% of my video. What the heck? Why didn't you watch the other 50%? But it was cool and at the same time. And it kind of fed that viral loop. And so that was like one of the things, understanding what we're giving away for free. We were solving a beginner problem. You see, we just slapped on the free trial, solving the intermediate stuff. And when you do that, that's where you start to see like, that's a really hard thing to do. It's kind of like, I know you both are into like working out and stuff. It's like giving somebody the first day is like, hey, go run a marathon, will ya? It's like, no. That does not end off well. Like start with the 5K or like start with the kilometer or something like that. That's the ideal free motion, is like start with something easy at the end of the day.
Wes, do you have other examples of clients you've worked with or products you've worked on to like, we got the Vidyard example. It's a beautiful one. I think there's, be a lot of people that remember seeing that, viewed it coming out as an early tool. Are there some others that we can use as examples of this, starting with the beginner problem?
Totally. Yeah. And so I'll think of one where it's like wasn't that good of an experience. So I was recently looking for companies that were recently acquired by private equity, and I was like, oh, I found about PitchBook, and then they had a free trial, and I was like, oh, great, let's sign up for the free trial. And it's literally just a sales call. It's like, okay, can we talk to you? Can we go through the? I'm like, no, actually, I'm not that interested. I wanted to see the data and whatever, but it wasn't like that critical for me to kind of go in and look at that. So that was something where I was like, you know what, that wasn't really solving the beginner problem. Like they could have solved that with like literally just like, hey, give me the top 10 or something like that, top 5, solving that beginner problem with just enough to pique that curiosity of what that looks like for me on that end. Mm-hmm. So yeah, when you unbundle it that way, it becomes a bit easier to unpack that value.
Does it? Oh, go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just going to say, I'm taking like a really interesting lesson from this conversation right now, because I tend to look at things as, the go-to-market strategy first, right? And so I'm thinking through, and you're telling the Vidyard story, and like my mind is screaming about like, well, what was the annual contract value? How did you talk to the sales team? Like, was there a mismatch between the free trial strategy and the price point? And I know pricing strategy is one of the things, but I think your point is very, very potent. I just want to call it out for the people listening that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like the first problem you solved wasn't a pricing problem to fix the motion. It was a product problem. And you said very casually some really, really meaty stuff in there. Like all we had to do was change how the entire first experience of Vidyard worked, and all of a sudden product led worked, right? And so I think that there's just so many founders out there that look at this as just how do I open the front door and let some people in, and my product's pretty good and it'll work with, and they're underestimating like the product changes, right? The depth
Yeah.
of this work that will actually matter. My question is there still a correlation between like the ticket price of the software and will PLG work? Because I always correlated as like low ACV works for product led growth. Like, is it just a product problem, or is there a correlation between like your annual contract value and running the strategy also?
I'd actually think like take a step back too, and like back to that iceberg where it's like, okay, at the top level, most people focus on those three things: your model, offer, overall kind of experience. Everything below the surface is actually where the magic happens. And so, like that second time, what the difference was, and this will get back to the pricing and everything else, is we didn't connect it to the overall strategy of how our company was going to win. And so at that time, it's like, okay, it's hard to make a video. How do we make that easy? How do we create a product? It's like, okay, absolutely, that product would fit into that. We didn't have the right team that had the capability to do this really, really well. And so we had to hire a new team, go through that and build that out, that really understood this. The data, we didn't have the right data to understand. It's like, you know what, where are people dropping off? We had no idea the first time, like what was going on. The growth process, we didn't actually launch any experiments once it was launched to improve that overall experience, the onboarding, everything else, the pricing, the upgrades. So of course it was just kind of stagnant. It didn't work. And then all of those things are kind of what I call the product led organization that support this. And so your PLG motion will only become as strong as your product led organization. And so it's really the yin to the yang kind of thing, if you will, on that end. And so how it relates to the ACV and everything else, it's like there's so many examples of product led companies where it could start off with like a $50 per month plan and it scales up to $1 million plus contracts. Like when we were working with Boomi, it was exactly that. Their CEO was like, you know what, we're going to have a $50 per month plan. And like they're $4 billion company. It's like, okay, that's for them. That was like really low. And so then it's like, but you know, these can scale up to massive companies that's or ACVs on that end.
Yeah, because that was a big part. I remember, I don't know why I remember this, but I remember I was reading the S1 when Zoom went public, right? And they said like 55% of their 100K and higher accounts, right, came from single user free, accounts. And so, yeah, I think it's just an interesting point to call out right in the beginning as people are listening to this. They're like, oh, I should try this free trial thing. Like, it's not a thing. I feel like it's an organizational DNA thing. Is I feel like what you're saying here. You had to change a lot.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because it's like the team, the capabilities, they all have to support that too.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, let's get into that. I want to put a bow on the first piece. If you're not a product led company right now, it sounded like the question you can ask yourself to decide whether or not there's an opportunity here, and we'll unpack the rest of the decisions. But the first one is the problem I'm solving, is there a beginner version, an intermediate version, and an expert version? And could I put the beginner version into something where if they use it, they become the Super Mario? They take the flower, it gets bigger. It delivers value. So it's small problem, beginner problem, big value that gets them moving up the ladder. Am I putting that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, if you realize like you have that free model or something like that, you're like, oh, it's really hard for people to get started. I call that like the cold start problem. Like that was us, the first example with our free trial with that complicated marketing automation solution. And then it's like, you want to go from cold start to like fast start. What does that look like for people to quickly get started, quickly get value, and solve those beginner problems? Because they're a lot easier to solve at the end of the day.
And it's probably, is it more common that it's actually another version of your product? It's not the existing product. Cause like you viewed it was a whole new Chrome extension and arm of the software. It wasn't like you just repackaged or turned off some features of the main product. This was something specifically designed to solve the beginner problem. Is that more common, or is that the exception to the rule?
I would actually say it's more of the exception to the rule. And maybe like for companies that are around like the 6 to kind of 50 mil range, where you're like, hey, you know what, we have this successful thing going. Let's not like rock the ship, our core product, and wreak havoc, if you will. But yeah, for earlier stage companies, it's usually just like you got to tweak some things and understand what that will look like. It's usually for the bigger companies where you're like, yeah, actually, we should probably launch something a bit smaller. Or if you have complicated enterprise tech, it's like, let's take that thing and put it down, because that is solving more of the beginner problem. But that's usually rarely the case because the enterprise problems are the more complicated ones to solve anyways.
Mm-hmm. All right, I got a limiting belief potentially that
Yes.
you'd hear that would say there's real risk in that you solve the beginner problem and they never move up to go do the intermediate, or you've taken what used to be a 10K per year ACV high, or even higher than that, and now we're solving it for 1 or 2K. How do you make sure you don't cannibalize your core offer when you're trying to explore and or become a product-led organization?
Yeah, first off, I will say there is something known as, like, I call it like the free frontier, where it's like the zone of non-monetization. And in every industry and space, it always grows. Every single year grows again and again. So for us at Product Led, it's like, hey, product led growth fundamentals, like, I do not want to monetize that. Like, please, I will give you everything you need to understand the fundamentals, because that is like beginner of a beginner problem. Just get to know what PLG is, please. And like, you won't even bother like paying us or whatever. It's like, we'll give you the best stuff for that, because that's a like preset of a beginner problem. And so, yes, there is instances like that where like that is always growing every single year in the industry, where you just have to give more and more away for free in that sense. But then how do you connect to it? It's like, okay, we don't just want to have freeloaders all the time in our product ends. So the number one way we found that helps people avoid that problem is just clarity on what is that kind of first strike, first value in your product that you could give them, that effect where it's like, you know what, they're feeling like they're accomplishing more, they're doing something really powerful that they couldn't do before, but it's not the full thing. I'll give you an example here with Evernote. So I was using Evernote's free plan for 8 years. My only use case is I have it open, I journal in it every day, and I didn't need all the fancy bells and whistles features. They had shown me probably thousands, kid you not, thousands of little 50% off here, Wes. You can upgrade your dashboard and make it all cute. I was like, I don't care. The notes work great. But as soon as they gated the number of notes I could take, they capped it at 50. I was like, oh, I'm a sucker. There's no way I am up. Well, actually, no, I upgraded right away, but I was like, there's no way I'm exporting this to anything else, because I'm like, I am stuck. Like there is no tomorrow here where I'm not upgrading. So that's an example where it's like they understood the exact range, where it's like, by 50 notes, you should get a habit with using our product. You should understand this. Maybe for some people it's earlier, but others, that's kind of the range you look for. So it's just enough values, not too much, not too low.
Got it. Go ahead, Matt.
I was gonna say, I feel like I've had that same experience with a different software. I feel like HubSpot is world class at this. And it's just one of those things. It's like it's like, game recognized game. Sometimes like I see everything we do in HubSpot, and then I see them just get us on something, and it just makes me laugh. And I'm like, you know what, guys, well done. There's another thing there. And it's like, when you nail all the different usage-based drivers and everything like that, you finally find that one where it's like, Wes Bush is not going to write his 51st note without putting in his credit card number first.
Yeah.
It's a wild thing, man. It's I just, how do you walk people through figuring that out? Because I think, like, to Johnny's point, I have a similar belief. Like, my whole worldview on product led, which I would love for you to take out a sledgehammer and break to pieces on this podcast, is like, it's incredibly powerful, but you've got to be really surgical about the decisions you make. Or if you're not, it's a really great way to just light a whole bunch of money on fire and mess up your business if you don't do it right. So like, how do you walk people through like figuring out their version of the 50 note cap in Evernote? Like, what's the right product decisions, and how do you coach people who are early stage to figure out the thresholds, especially if they don't have a ton of data yet? Like, how do they do that?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll start off with a quote I love from Rob Walling. He was like, freemium is like a samurai sword. If you don't know what you're doing, you can chop your arm off pretty easily. And I love it because it's like, it is true. Like, I've seen it on the other spectrum. Yeah. It's like too many people give away way too much. And then they're like, oh, why are people not upgrading? And then I see it's always like too much or too little. Then they're like,
Mm.
oh, we're going to give them a 3-day free trial, or like, and I'm like, and how long does it take to get to value there? They're like, oh, it takes forever. But we want them to click around. And I'm like, that's not tangible value. That is no Super Mario test there. Like,
Right.
they are signing up and being the exact same person. So no transformation there whatsoever. So that is the key. It's like, does it provide a simple transformation or a new habit for some of those products? So if it's like a habit forming product, like an Evernote or something like that, it's like, okay, we have to develop that habit and have this go. And also the slight nuance here to kind of consider is, what is your goal as a company? Like if you're venture back and you're like, hey, we just want to grow super, super fast. Like Vidyard and Loom are going to like neck and neck with a video free kind of tool. And it's like, they both had these terrible, in my mind, free models, because it was just like you gave everything away for free. And they didn't have much incentive to upgrade until they capped it to like 25 videos. And then that was like enough for it. Like, okay, I'm getting used to the value here. This feels right. And so I would always just like, yes, find exactly what is that transformation you want. But if your goal is viral growth and you have a product that can grow that way, then you might just want to loosen the reins and be like, it's intentionally free. And we're intentionally trying to just go after and grab the majority of the market while we can at that stage.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So I've heard you, there's
depends.
So yes. You mentioned there's two vectors now. One would be the volume of use, so usage, 25 notes, 25 videos, etc. I think the obvious one is feature set, right? So you mentioned the Evernote version of trying to say, hey, organize your dashboard. Is there another, outside of like the features and the frequency of use? Is there another one that like that you a lens to think through that would create
the overall kind of like usage? Those are the like main two ones. The other one is time. That's like the most kind of basic one. It's like, how long do you have to do this? And you can mix and match these. Usually what I would recommend if you're early stage, like, please don't be cute when it comes to just mixing and matching and, oh yeah, let's do a reverse trial. It's like, usually companies at like some scale do that and it does work, but don't try and just do something crazy when you're just still learning the basics.
Yeah. Wes, have you seen a company accidentally change their ICP when they launch product led?
Oh, even worse. I see a lot of companies launch the PLG motion without knowing they have a new ICP using that product. And then they're wondering, why are we not attracting the right people? Because usually when they're more sales led, they would know their ideal buyer, I hope, knock on wood. And then it's like when you launch your product led motion, you just don't understand who your ideal user is. And it's not the same person, not always at least, especially in B2B. It's like your ideal user could be somebody completely different than that COO or somebody that like actually signs off and they're like, oh yeah, let's use that tool and roll it out to the entire company.
Okay, guys. So how do you, so you're saying actually the default assumption should be that you are changing your ICP and define that for the product-led cohort of your client base. And then you have a framework or an exercise of how you think through how to make, if you're changing the ICP, it's typically earlier stage. You say, hey, this is the problem before the main problem. We're solving that beginner problem. How do you make sure that how can you test the hypothesis that this earlier stage ICP is going to grow into the later stage? Is it just, you got to run the experiments, or do you have some, frameworks or exercises you walk your clients through to stress test this before they go put a bunch of time and money into launching product led and find that they can't actually outgrow? They've accessed a new version of the market. They're not worth as much and they don't grow into the main thing. I think a lot of times it's product led growth is the promise of, ditch the sales team and allow users to use the product and graduate through their usage and evolution through the problem and the product into higher tiered plans. But there's a big hypothesis there that we pick the right beginner problem that leads to the intermediate problem. You have any frameworks or ways to think through that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's like a couple that go in tandem. So for the first one, when you're thinking about who is that ideal user, the framework I love, and I'm sure you guys are pretty familiar with it, is the BJ Fogg behavior model, where you're thinking about like, how do you get anybody to do anything? Just Google it if you're not sure what it is. But on that one, there's 3 kind of criteria you look at to get anybody to do any target behavior. The first one's motivation. So like, how motivated are these users to actually sign up, solve a specific problem. And then when it comes to their overall ability, like, can they get to value here? Can they figure it out? If they're not tech savvy and they can't go through it, and you have a complicated product, like, I don't know if that's going to work. You can try, but you might have to do some fine tuning on your overall experience. So like, I look at motivation, ability. The last thing is the overall kind of like triggers. Like, are they constantly getting bombarded, reminded of solving this specific problem? And if you're like, yes, super motivated, yes, they have a lot of good ability, and yes, they are like getting this message that they need to solve this problem. This is like top of mind for them. Those are like my favorite ideal users, where you're like, okay, now let's look at the retention stats, see, do these people stick around a long time? If so, it's like, wow, okay, we found the winner. We're going to double down on these people. We're going to focus on them because they have a high likelihood of winning when it comes to using your specific product. And so that's the very first thing is you kind of evolve in your PLG motion. You will realize there's kind of like, you go from people who are like the chefs in the kitchen, where like, oh, I'm okay, like going into your SaaS product, making my own food and like figuring it all out. Those are usually like your early adopters. Then there's like the next level, which is like the microwavers. They're like, I just want to go into your SaaS, click a few buttons and get my shit. You're like, I love those people too. And as you get better and better at what you do and make it easy, you want to have more of those people who are like, okay, they're just microwavers. And eventually it's like completely automated kind of deal. So that's kind of the spectrum. And as every time you make one of those quantum leaps, going from like the chef to the microwaver, all that stuff, your product should just become a lot easier for people to get that. And you can basically 10x your TAM every time you do that.
So I had this question I wanted to ask you, and you just dovetailed perfectly, right? The way you ended that sentence about, if you do X, Y, and Z, you can 10x your total addressable market, right? And the question I have is a super high level one. You talked a lot about, not realizing that your ideal customer is going to change when you change this go-to-market strategy. A lot of the time, the founders I work with are interested in trying a product-led motion because they haven't been able to get traction on a non-product-led motion, right? And like, well, maybe this will be the thing that unlocks it. Yes. And I think frequently, I don't know that that's a good plan, right? Unless you're willing to make like the product changes and the org changes that you're talking about. So my question, Wes, is, when you're first starting to work with someone, you're talking to a founder and they're like, I want to do this product led thing. I'm assuming you ask them like, why do you think this is a good idea for your company? Right? Like, why should someone consider this, and answer it from whatever angle. Maybe they can't get traction at all. Maybe they got something good going on, but if it's not obvious that they might be changing their ICP, they might just think of this as another marketing tactic. So like, when is this a good idea in the context of a company?
Yeah, I love this because there's so many like rabbit holes this could go down, where when we think about a company that's not having traction, like why is it not having traction? Is it because you're not solving a meaningful problem? Like, that's the thing where I'm like, please don't just waste another like 6 months and a bunch of runway to like make this PLG thing work.
To still not solve the problem.
You're not solving the problem. If it's that, it's like, please don't. And I tell them, I was like, usually in our program, like we like want people to get at least to like 6 figures plus, where it's like, okay, you like, I don't care if you sell that yourself. Founder-led sales at that stage is amazing. Like, please do that. Please understand you're solving the meaningful problem. Like, if we can check the box there, it's like, let's understand what is the best go-to-market motion to scale that. Mm-hmm. And then we go into the equation of like, does this make sense for you right now? Do you need to go into more of the enterprise play to make this business work? Or is this more of like the kind of mass, small, medium-sized business problem where it's like, this is the only way to do this? Like, I know when I was talking to the founder of Hotjar, like that was their whole thing. They're like, you know what? All these enterprise companies, they're like charging a fortune for like this basic stuff. And we just want to go into the SMB space. And like, this is part of our mission. And we know this is an existing thing. A lot of people want this. And so it can also come out of that way, where it's just like the founder is very mission driven. They want to like make this accessible to everybody. I can get behind that too, because they already know it's an established problem.
Yeah. You said something there very nonchalantly, and I want to just double click on it and say it slower, because I think there's a lot of people who probably listen to this that are at that stage where you think it's a prudent idea for your first, call it $7,000 to $10,000 in monthly recurring revenue, to talk to the customers, run founder-led sales, make sure that your product market fit is at least has an early sign of being alive. And then at that point, you make the decision that I'm going to scale my company by developing a product-led growth strategy or a sales-led growth, like however you decide. But that early stage, first revenue in up to, 100K annually, like still boots on the ground, talking to customers hand to hand. Is that your recommendation, generally speaking?
Ideally. Yeah. Like get that customer feedback, all that stuff, because you do actually lose a good chunk of that whenever you do go self-serve, because you're just like, hey, like, see ya. You don't necessarily have to talk to us on that level. And so you do not have the same level of like understanding of the problem and the offer, all those things. And so you can learn a lot faster if you do that yourself. Now, what I've seen founders do is like mix and match that over time. They're like, okay, actually our onboarding process, our sign up process can be completely automated. It's like, I don't want to do that part, but then maybe you offer onboarding coaching sessions or something like that to get people to value a lot faster. And so you can phase yourself out of it as you build your product led motion.
Got it.
I really thought we were going to find someone in the camp of, no, it's okay, you can hide behind the keyboard, not talk to customers. But turns out even the product led guy says you got to go talk to clients. Like it is the number of times we say it in a given month, we're like, you have to go talk to your clients. You have to go talk to your clients. You don't fight for, you run the risk of automating a process that does not work if you don't talk to them enough. Like, go run through onboarding, watch how they use the product. And when you see them do it the same way 10 times, 50 times, 100 times, you're like, perfect. Now we can lock that in. Maybe it's a tooltip. Maybe it's a video. We figure out a way to to reduce the friction in product, and we can go move on to other things. But how do you, I would imagine if we are at SaaS Academy, there's I would say 30% of our products are product led, of the clients in our program are product led first. The other 70% are, what we call mid-market or enterprise. And we still talk about frequently, hey, go do it manually first and then automate. I'd imagine you are attracting all the people who want to like not talk to clients, automate the whole thing. Like, how do you, is there a happy medium? Like, how do you deal with that objection when you're talking to founders trying to figure out what the product needs to look like?
Yeah, I guess like the way we structure is like, you just do it. It's a part of the process. And maybe that's not something you might know when you sign up, because you're like, oh, I want the PLG, the dream. And then they're like, here's the broccoli. And
yes.
Like, really? I got to eat that? And I'm like, yeah. And so the way it's kind of like it's all broken down too, it's like you will mess up a lot of the other components and everything else if you don't do this. And so it's like, do you want the hard way or do you want the like simple way? And the simple way is actually a bit more work, but it's work up front so that everything else is smooth sailing. So what do you want? And usually a lot of people are like, okay, I get it. And I think it's just also, how do you make it easy for people to do? Because I think there's a lot of like people saying, talk to customers, but then there's not a lot of like, hey, here's an easy way to do it. Like there's tons of stuff you could do, but just do this and it'll get you there. And try and make it something where it doesn't even feel like you're like, oh, I'm setting up customer research calls. It's like, no, okay, if you're doing demos, that can count too. If you're doing like onboarding, coaching sessions, hey, that can count too, because you're just, for us, logging every single one of these little challenges where you're like, oh yeah, that's a bug. How do we remove that so they don't have to talk to you on that level? And so, I think it's just create that simple way that they can do it.
Yeah. All right, Wes, if someone's listening to the call so far or to the podcast so far, we've presented a lot of reasons to do product-led growth. I noticed as I was doing some research for the podcast, you do a pretty good job of putting the warning label on the bottle of you're not ready or not prepared to do it unless, I call it counting the costs. Understand truly what it takes. I think the iceberg image is a perfect illustration of this. It's not just the freemium or free trial version of the product, it's all the other stuff. Give us some reasons why. Like, if you say who's not right for product led, and let's start to kind of unpack. If you're not ready to do X, Y, or Z, you should just leave product led alone because it's destined to fail from the start.
Oh man, well, tell me when you want me to stop the rant. So
Rant on, baby. That's why you're here.
there's a lot. So first thing is like, what kind of market are you in? Are you creating like a blue ocean where you're educating a lot of people on how to do things? So if there's a lot of education you got to do, that's kind of a red flag in one way, where I'm like, okay, if it's hard for people to grasp, understand, you may need to have more of that sales led way, because you know what, at the end of the day, that salesperson is doing a ton of the heavy lifting of educating people, providing value. And it's not just friction, it's a ton of value in that situation. So there's always like, I don't know, counter examples like ChatGPT launched completely new, but it was easy enough for everybody to grasp. If you can have it where it's like it's new and easy to grasp, sure, it could still work. But if it's new and hard to grasp, like, how do I do that? Red flag. So that's the kind of first one. The other kind of two are really related, are conviction and commitment. I mean, this just goes down to everything else. I've had so many founders where they're like, yes, I want this. This is great. It's like somebody who wants to become a rock star. And they're like, I want to be him. And then they look at like everything they got to do. They're like, oh no, they practice that much. They do that. Oh, and then they get like dissuaded. And then there's like, yeah, there's some changes here. Like actually, when you go product led, the core thing I believe you should know, just warning label, is a sales led business is easy to start, hard to scale. And a product led business, you know what? It's really hard to start and it's easier to scale. And so it's like, where do you want to have that kind of like connection at the beginning where it's hard or whatnot? And so if you're not willing to have that hard start, that's a big red flag where I would be like, okay, probably not the right fit.
That's
right
a
now.
mic drop moment, Wes, right there, man. It's so do you find that you see more repeat founders trying to do this out of the gate, like people who are willing to eat the elephant early on in the process, or like how do you see anything there?
Yeah, like those are our kind of best customers who are like, hey, listen, I just have done the sales led thing. I've exited these other companies, but I don't know what I don't know on the product led side. And I just want kind of a guiding hand to go through that. So yeah, absolutely.
Man, that's cool.
How I'm trying to think of how you can do the conversion. I can get both. I can get the easy to start, and then somewhere along the middle of the journey, recognize, oh, I'm getting to the part where it's harder to scale. Do you find founders making the transition when they're trying to get out of founder-led sales and instead of hiring a sales team? So like they're doing all the demos, they scale it up. It's like we find the ceiling depends on the ACV, but you're going to start feeling it at like $1 million, $1.5 million in ARR. If you're doing founder-led sales, you start to like really drown in just the volume. It's not. We talked to a guy yesterday. He's doing 4 million, still doing. You know, in the enterprise space, the numbers are skewed a little bit. But if we're talking averages, you normally start to feel it when you get there. Do you have you seen a founder doing founder led sales make the pivot and get out of the easiest start? Sweet, we got the easy part there, and convert to the easier to scale. Or is the product side going to be challenging from day one, regardless of whether or not you got the base of revenue? Like, is it harder to do it in the middle of your journey or same?
Oh, yeah. I would always say it's harder to do it like later on in the journey than it is to do it at the very beginning. And so that's just because if you like, you're building the DNA is different in that company. The processes are a lot different. And yeah, I've seen a lot of companies fumble because they're like, hey, we want to do this product led thing. And they do exactly what we did at Video, like slap on the free trial. It's not working. And then they're like, they don't know everything below the surface they got to change, and then they learn that, then they're like, nah, actually maybe we just double down on this sales thing. A little easier, we know it's predictable, and it's a proven playbook. Like, why not on that level? Now that can work, but if it's like core to your strategy you figured out, then that's another kind of thing you just have to go through and blender.
Yeah. So despite that wisdom, let's say you are there, right? You're the 1 million ARR founder. You know, you say that it's harder to do at that stage because of the DNA, but I'd love for you to pull that apart a little bit more. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm thinking like one of the things that I feel like having a sales-led process lets you punt very far downrange is like product analytics, right? Where you can get by with pretty lightweight, couple data points, maybe we'll figure it out when we go talk to the customers. right? So I feel like that's one thing that probably if you're doing a PLG motion, you got to be surgical with. But I'm sure for you as the expert here, you probably know a half a dozen, right? Like what are the non-obvious things where if you're that, $1.5 million ARR founder and you're like, I want to flip the switch, even though Wes knows it's hard and I know I'm going to be deficient in these certain areas, like what are the things that they're going to have to go clean up? You know what I mean? From like the non-obvious list of stuff.
So there's 9. I don't know if you want me to go through them all, but
Let's do it.
Very first one is your strategy. So how does this connect to how you're going to win as a business? First, get cleared on like what is winning for your specific business. How can you become that obvious choice in your industry? What does that obvious choice look like? Like there's only one Canva in the space and we all know we love it, all that stuff too, but there's many, many other kinds of companies, but what could you actually win at? So get clear on that. What is required for you to do that? How are you going to win? Like what are those moats you have to build in your business? And so what all cascades from that is just, you got to understand the capabilities. Like, can we actually do that at a very high level, become world-class at that? So that's where we start. And then it's like, let's get super clear on our ideal user. Who is that person? What are their challenges? What is that like Super Mario kind of moment for them, that transformation? And then what is our model is kind of the third thing. It's just like, how do we decide what do we need to give away for free for them to experience that core kind of transformation? And then the next phase is just literally, how do we build your go-to-market motion and product that can sell itself? You need a good offer, great onboarding, and like powerful pricing, which is like the pricing piece is really interesting because when I was writing my first book, I was like, I use this term where I was like, it's kind of like this weird arranged marriage where you're like, okay, we have this model that we're giving away for free. And then we have this pricing, which like needs to feed into each other based on what we were talking about. Like some of the usage amounts of like, if we give away this amount for free, then they magically upgrade to the free plan. So deciding like, what does that look like is a really kind of big thing and you got to make it transparent. And so that's kind of the sixth step. And the last three are really just how do you scale this up? Back to your point, Matt, about the data. It's like, what's going on with your users? Where are those users dropping off in that specific journey? Do you know from sign up to first value to like hitting a key usage indicator in the product where they experience the value 3 times or more to upgrading? Where are people dropping off? So what is that biggest bottleneck? And then the next piece is like, do we actually have a growth process to launch experiments to improve this again and again? And the last one is team. And it's last for a reason for a product company, because if you go through that, you can actually afford to hire as a last resort because your product will most likely solve the majority of the problems. Like if you have an onboarding problem, it's not like, let's just throw another body at it. Let's actually just see what could we do easier. And so they don't need to reach out to us in the first place.
I feel like this is a slam dunk for like a strategically minded technical founder. Like this has got to be the playground for that person, you know? That's
totally.
Dude, I love the framework. Thanks, Wes. That's cool.
So I saw you talk about this rhythm you teach called the growth process meeting. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So this is kind of born from, I'm sure you guys, I talked to Dan, EOS, EOS. Mm-hmm. There's like your L10 meetings, and those are fantastic meetings. And so for the growth process meetings, what that's really all about is how do we kind of get everybody aligned on first, what is the core bottleneck in the business? So that's like the first kind of part of the meeting we go through. What is that? But then what's really different about the standard way of like IDSing specific issues in EOS and those specific meetings is we go through and say, okay, this is core bottleneck. Let's just exhaust the number of solutions here. We're going to look at product solutions, content solutions, resource solutions. I call it the PCR test. Get everybody kind of brainstorming across the team as far as how do we solve this? So everybody on the team is thinking about this core bottleneck. How do we solve from all these different angles? And then you're just simply killing a lot of these ones and saying, actually, that probably won't work that well. Let's go through, prioritize this list. And then you come up with, out of that meeting, like some very great things that everybody can do to just solve that specific bottleneck. And you just happen to solve it a lot faster versus just kind of going through the standard way of like, okay, that first idea sounds amazing on that end.
Awesome. I love it. I'm very interested in the rhythms. The problems will change, right? But the rhythms that solve the problems, you get really good at that. I think a lot of people wonder, like, what is operations in a company? And in my opinion, it's that. It's like building the fitness of the organization to whatever problem comes your way, you've got the tools, the rhythms, the communication to solve that bottleneck. So what you're saying is the bottleneck's always going to change and move. This is the rhythm that puts all of the brightest minds in the company on that problem, on that bottleneck, prioritizes solutions, and then gets into action.
Yeah, for sure. And that keeps everybody accountable. Well, like whoever has that specific bottleneck, they're kind of like the mini CEO for the week.
Yeah.
Like everybody help them. Like this is the core bottleneck for the business. So let's drop not everything, but like let's make sure we're helping this person succeed.
Yeah, I love it. Wes, talk to us about writing the book. You're right. You wrote one, product-led growth. Then book number 2 is coming out in August. I'd really love to tell us about how it's April now, probably May by the time this thing comes out. Is this a bet that you'll be done by August? Is it done and this is a part of the launch strategy? Talk to us. Like, I want to unpack why write book number 2, and then 2, what's behind the launch strategy.
Oh yeah. So for the why part, I don't know, you kind of froze there. Just me, Matt.
All good, man. Why do it? And is it ready? And just rock and roll.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So for like why we decided to write this one is we realized a lot of companies were implementing PLG and it just wasn't working. And so we were like, well, why is that? So we've helped over like 324 plus SaaS companies. We realized like, a good chunk of them, it was not sticking. Like they would go through the motion, roll out the model, all that stuff. And so it's really everything we discussed today, like everything below the surface. How do we help operationalize this and make it a product-led organization that can actually support a world-class PLG motion? And so that's why I'm writing this book, is really to make it easier for anybody to go through this journey, launch it, and actually build and scale a successful product-led business. And so that's the main mission behind this book. And I guess how it connects to the business is it's literally our process for how we help it. So as I'm writing it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the easiest, best way we can help you. So you learn about the book, and that's also our free motion back to our beginner problem. In order for you to understand you want to work with us, you have to understand what is the right path, what is the best approach to do this. And so that's the kind of transformation unlock for us, where it's like, hey, first stage, learn about that, and a book is the best way to do that.
Yeah. It's interesting. We're in the process of doing the same thing. Sometime this year, we'll launch SaaS Academy's first book, sharing the methodology. Awesome. And it really is a great way. I love that you've said it's solving the beginner problem. It's the methodology. All of the execution is actually the hardest part. So I would think that most people hearing you talk through the 9 elements, I would say of where it gets the majority of the time and focus, it's on the strategy piece. And then I think most people think that like, cool, done. So in the example here would be, you read the book, you think you got, knowing is like 5 to 10% of the challenge. It's the start, but it's certainly not the end. Is that where you see most companies get tripped up as the main bottleneck, the disconnect between having flushed out a strategy and then missing the other 8 components that lead to a successful product-led growth model and organization? Or is there another bottleneck that kills the progress?
Yeah, actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because like I'm like, no, almost everybody that comes to us, they think their strategy is rock solid, and they don't even think about it, and they don't like change it or anything like that with rolling up the PLG motion, but they all get obsessed about the model. And so that's usually where most of them start in our process. So they skip the first 2 things. They don't know their ideal user, no strategy. They start there, and then they slap on the new offer. They're like, oh, why is it not connecting? Well, it's like you're talking to a completely new ideal user, but let's say it in a nicer way. And then the onboarding experience isn't done, or they don't do that very well. And so people just don't get there. And so the main thing they have or left with is a low free to paid conversion rate. That's like the most common symptom that like you did something wrong across this process.
Very interesting. Go ahead. Yeah, that passes a smell test with me. I'm thinking back to my first company, and I wanted in the worst way to be product led. I saw it. I saw the oasis, right? Like they just sign up and they get the thing and it's scalable. And I mean, I was a first time founder. I coming out of the fire department, I had no idea how to build software. I had no idea how to build an interface that worked well. I didn't know anything. And luckily I realized that I had no idea how to do this stuff, and like our software worked, but everything you said, I'm like going down this trip down memory lane. Everything you said was like, oh yeah, I couldn't have done that. I couldn't have done that. I couldn't have done that. Our onboarding was like super manual, and so is this like what people get from the book and from your programs and stuff like that? Is it bridging that skill gap? Because like if I had tried this 5 years ago, I would have failed miserably and just, probably failed the whole company. Right. So is it into the weeds where it's like, this is how you build an onboarding flow, this is how you guide people through that initial value process? Like what skill gaps do you see that you help people get across?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's like back to like you're a coaching organization as well. It's like, what do coaching organizations do really well? It's like building capabilities in other people. And so how do you do that? It's like, yeah, you do actually need to get sometimes in the weeds with people and help them understand not just like the nitty gritty details, but how to think holistically about this. What are the frameworks, the mental models, all those things. And so that's really our mission too, is like, there's these 9 core components, but all of them are capabilities too. How you understand your user, how you understand like crafting your model, not just for today, but for the next version, next time you go through your strategy. And so, yeah, everything's built like that because it is a capability, and that's our goal.
Yeah. I remember as being so naive, man. I was like, I'll just buy app queues. Like that'll solve the onboarding problem.
Yes.
I'll put a couple pop-ups. I'll be good to go. And
that's another rant of mine.
Yeah. Right. So 3 years later, we're doing
Yeah,
one-on-one onboarding calls, and that's the only way to get people to value. We just did it and we priced it and it worked. But yeah, man, I was like, app queues, that'll solve it. Sure didn't.
And you see like, oh, how to get started. You're like, tooltip.
Yeah.
I call it like getting tooltip to death. And I'm like, oh God, I haven't got value yet.
So what's the right version of that? Because I'm putting myself in the seat of clients that we coach and just founders in general, and myself 5 years ago. And I'm like, tooltips, like, yeah, that'll do it. Just show them what to click. And the users are like, is it a bespoke onboarding process? Like you have to build this into the product and like lock stuff down until they go through the flow. Like I know it's a little bit individual, but what are the overall best practices here? Like how do you nail this onboarding sequence?
Yeah, so I created this bowling alley framework to do just this. So like how to make it easier for people to go through onboarding, set it up. And so if you know bowling, you basically know how to do it, which is like, the goal is you want to get strikes. And so the first part of the game is define the game. So what is a strike for your specific product and that free experience? Define it. Then what we have to do from the very first point, they get onto your homepage or website somehow, maybe it's an ad or something like that. And you map out currently all the steps to getting to that strike, everything. And what I like to do with teams when we do this is like, I want you all to like have a little competition with each other. What is the exact minimum number of steps here? Because they're all going to find like different ways through the product. And then we all kind of align and go through and say, okay, now how can we like kill 20, 30% of these steps? Let's just label them red. They don't need to be there. Stupid steps. Then there's the more complicated, nuanced ones, which are yellow, which is like, these are advanced steps. Like, useful, but not right now. Like I was just working with the clients the other day and they're like, yeah, we want 2-factor authentication like set up right when they onboard. I'm like, no, terrible idea.
No, you don't.
Please don't. I know you want it, but no. So perfect example, yellow step. And then you're left with the green steps that are literally just, it's a straight line. Perfect straight line to that first strike. Now your product doesn't have that right now. So what you need to do is you got to layer on the bumpers to make it easy for anybody to do this. The first bumper is your product bumper. So this is like back to the app queues or the tool tips you'd use are going to guide people from each step through that journey to exactly do that. So it's anybody can sign up and get the value. And then the last bumper you throw on is the conversation bumper. So where do people drop off? And that's where we say, okay, people drop off from sign up to onboarding. Okay, so let's send them a message. Let's text them. Let's do something to get them back on that straight line because we want to get them to the next step. And then, they drop off there. Okay, we get them again with another like targeted communication. A lot of times companies just do like the stock, like 14-day free trial onboarding sequence, but your messaging needs to be targeted based on where they're stuck. So that's like high level how you could approach it.
Dude, I love that. Like that's That I feel like that's one of those nuances, right? Is if it's very one-to-one implemented, you can get by with time-based onboarding messaging, but if it's not, right, it's got to be event-based, and
Totally.
I love that, man. Awesome. Thanks for breaking that down.
All right.
Wes, I would imagine there's some sales-led companies that can learn a lot from just the strategies that make product-led successful. Like I've ripped a few pages out of the book of like seeing great product-led onboarding processes and say, well, even if we have a customer success-led motion, there's still a lot of work that happens in between our training sessions that if I can reduce the friction, it makes it more likely that they show up to my second training call with all of the stuff done. What have you, I'm sure you've seen, and maybe you have an example, whether it was a Vidyard or others, where can we take some of the principles from product led and apply them to a sales led motion and see some efficiencies gained?
Yeah.
Like if you're going to coach the sales led founder, where do you focus?
Yeah, I would say let's start making money right away, and let's start with expansion. And so how can we use, like, whether it's tooltips, product tours, or anything like that, to start engaging people that are like ripe for upgrades based on their usage? You go through that and just try and upgrade more people. That's like the easiest way, where it's like, hey, we're thinking product led. We already made you X number amount of dollars because of this. That's awesome. Then you can start moving down to, okay, let's take another big swing. Let's look at your onboarding. Okay, right now, let's say for most sales like companies, it's like on average kind of like 2-4 calls with customer success to get you set up. It's like, okay, how can we like kill one of those? And what do you do on that fourth call? Oh, yeah, totally. Let's map that out and let's just create tooltips or whatever that is to just do that automatically. And they're like, oh, great. Now the customer's empowered. They're saving money on, it's just way more efficient. They can carry on 25% more customers with the same staff. So you get some efficiency. It's not like the wow part, but when you start really basically reducing those from like 4 to like 1, that's where you start getting the insane leverage of a product-led business, but still at a sales-led company from the onboarding and expansion side of things.
Yeah, I think a great gateway would be product-led expansion. Just focus on the expansion revenue side, because it's so much of our energy and effort. When you do start deploying customer success teams is in onboarding, and then we get them just past the burn line where we know they're not going to churn anymore, and we just stop talking to them. We just keep focusing on the next ones that come in, and we just leave so much opportunity in that relationship of increasing the LTV and developing a very low risk. You can always intervene, and in fact, we've talked to clients that are predominantly, whether it's freemium or just SMB, where you can maybe do group onboarding calls, whatever. You're not working one-to-one. We help them triage their client list to say, okay, just talk to the top 10% and do manual expansion there, like based on potential, based on usage, whatever, focus there. But quite often there's a whole cohort that you just don't, the volume is so high, you just don't have the time, and it's not worth it one-to-one. It'd be a great place to go hone some of those product-led skills. I'm curious, Wes, you are knee deep in this space. Who's inspiring you? What companies are pushing what's possible with product led forward? I mean, with AI and these co-pilots and low code, no code solutions, like there's a lot of innovation happening in SaaS right now. Are there some companies that are inspiring and I guess pushing you to push the limits of what's possible with product led?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. Like my old time favorite is definitely Canva. Like that one's just like, back to that Super Mario effect of like, oh, I can't design, and then you're like, I can somewhat design. And now it's like,
it still makes me feel that way when I use
profile.
Yeah, exactly.
Now my expensive designer is like, it's good enough to communicate the idea. Then we have our graphic designer take it to the whole other level. I'm like, okay, good. I can at least communicate my ideas. So that's definitely one of my favorites, and they got like a powerful freemium model for their business. And then, up until recently, like ChatGPT is a fantastic example of a killer free model. They got me on the upgrade. I was just curious, and it was really good, and stuff like that too. So I'm always fascinated with the companies that are usually in that, like, they bridge the gap between like B2B, B2C kind of thing, and they just have these really streamlined, like next level scale product-led motions. And so I usually look at those companies for the ideas that is like, hey, what are they doing? Because their volume is nuts. Versus like you taking it to the B2B SaaS space where you're like, hey, you have like 100 people signing up. How can we apply that to just making this really, really easy? And it doesn't always translate, but I just like studying the examples where they have like millions of signups per month to kind of see what have they done. What are they doing a bit differently to optimize that onboarding? Because you can bet they got many teams just focusing on one of those flows to improve for people.
Yeah. Can we talk benchmarks for a minute? Again, Matt and I spend most of our time with mid-market and enterprise SaaS. Help me understand what's normal like ACVs for a product-led SaaS company. What's the normal churn rates, LTVs? Like I'm sure you kind of run through an assessment when you're working with a client and figuring out what to go do next. Like, what are some of the the alarms that go off when you are working with really high churn or exceptional retention? Like, help us walk through some of the benchmarks of what's normal.
Yeah. So like one red flag, if their like ACV is like 30 to like 50K or something like that, they're like, we want to keep it with this product led motion. Then I'm like, this is going to be really hard because you're still going to have to hop on a call with them. And it's not going to be like pure in that sense. I'm not like a purist, but I'm like, it won't be self-serve, if you will. Like you could get them to value, you could get them to sign up self-serve, but the full thing, you will not get zero touch customers with that kind of price point. So on average, like what we're looking at is like sub 10K. ACV is usually very common for product-led companies, but that does not mean it could grow until something a lot bigger. And I think the one super underrated thing with product-led companies is they are, if you get your pricing right, they are built to expand. And it starts small. And then if you have your value-based metrics set up correctly, it expands on autopilot in that sense. As they get more value, you start charging them more and you have that great relationship. And so, it can grow up to those 30, 40, 50, even 100K plus per month options.
How about churn rate?
Yeah.
Like I think this is
a little higher.
Yeah, you might love the not having a team until you start to see like what is average churn. Like help me understand what's the range, good, better, best of churn in a product like company.
Yeah, so like anywhere from like 3 to kind of like 6%. That's kind of like on average what we usually see for some of our clients and stuff. And so that can vary a lot though. Like if you're really dialed in on who your ideal user is and you've done the retention kind of analysis and you know who is the good one versus the bad one signing up for your product, you can reduce that. But yeah, you are still usually dealing a lot more with smaller, medium-sized businesses that do even just business cycles. They go out of business or they are more price sensitive. So that is probably the one other thing of back to the red flags. If you're worried about that, as far as going into product led, that is a valid concern for sure.
What are the top acquisition channels you're seeing? Like, because your cost of acquisition has to be in line with the lower ACV as well. So it's not just, you can't take I think this has got to be one of the most challenging pieces for these mid-market 30, 50K is like the channels that you're using to acquire those customers have got to change in some way. I guess I get thinking out loud here. In some ways, you could also say that you're attracting traffic from those channels that's not qualified to buy your 30 to 50K offer, and so you have product led is almost like the down market solution to keep them in your world until they are ready. But what channels do you see, and then if you have benchmarks on like acquisition costs and CAC payback periods, I'd be interested on that.
Yeah, me too. For the CAC side of things too, on that end. But I will tell you, like for where product-led companies thrive the most is like red oceans, where it's commoditized. It's like you want to have that like product-led go-to-market motion to succeed. And so when it comes to what channels work in that, it's like, hey, if you can establish an early advantage in organic SEO, like that's fantastic because that is a very low cost channel as you scale it up. Obviously not low cost when you're doing it really, really well. And then just like paid search is a great one. If you do have people searching for intent, if you don't have intent, I mean, social is great for that, where it's like, okay, you have never thought about using this kind of product, but you should. But that's usually in a red ocean. People know to some degree what they're searching for. And so, yeah, those lower cost options before are the best ones.
Cool. It's interesting. So many entrepreneurs, coaches, advisors would say run from the red oceans. You're saying
Totally.
like this is a good sign on product led. You want there to be so
Race
much.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you almost want to just be playing a demand capture game rather than demand creation, right? Which is, I think, to your point earlier, don't do product led if there's a huge educational component to your product. That would be demand creation. We're educating on a new problem and a new point of view. A lot of dollars spent doing that, and therefore higher, ACV required. You're saying, hey, we want people, we want everyone feeling like they've got a design problem, and there's hundreds of design solutions out there. We're just going to beat them with a great product experience, aka Canva, and wade into red ocean. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to kind of prove that doesn't necessarily mean you don't or can't create like a killer strategy or something like that within that red ocean. But like one of our clients, Let's Get, they just have like they're going against Apollo, and it's like, you know what? For that specific example, it's like they have one thing against them. It's like triple verified emails and all that stuff. It's amazing, and so that is a perfect example where it's like you can still differentiate, can go through that, but then you still have that go to market motion that makes it more efficient.
Yeah, dude, I couldn't agree more. Like I talk about this a lot. In fact, even in an article I wrote this morning, I put this Twitter thread up about how to compete against the 800-pound gorillas in any industry. And like, I don't know. I get the blue ocean strategy. I like it, but there is such a beautiful angle, especially for bootstrap founders, whether it's product led or sales led, about competing against a big, slow, comfortable incumbent, slicing a piece of the market by specializing more and using that as the way to get the strategy started. It's just, I don't know, man. It's like, I feel like that's the cauldron that most startups were brewed inside of, it's, so I don't know. Yeah, I'm with you. A lot of people shun the red ocean. I'm all for it, man.
Totally. Yeah, there's actually demand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Hard
yeah.
to get.
Yeah, Wes, one of the things I'm taking away for the sales-led crew out there is in a single session, when they're out there searching for a solution, we've got to get them as far into solving that problem as possible. And if they just so happen to land on your website and request a demo and it stops there, and the process really slows down, we're leaving a lot on the table. So we got to figure out a way to get them farther in the process. Years ago, I developed this tactic called the demo on demand. That say, hey, if you don't want to wait for my sales team, I'll at least let you see it. And then later on, when that was successful, we actually opened up a freemium element to it, because we started to recognize that the more they were only going to buy when pain was at its highest point, and that could wane. They would, the next day they could wake up and the pain wasn't there. So we got them as far into solving the problem, feeling what this problem forever solved felt like, we earned a customer for life. But it was really quick and easy to move on to another problem in the business. And so I love this, distilling a couple of the product led, whether it's you start product led or convert to it, or just take some of the principles. I think it's been a really useful conversation on just like the psychology of what it's like to implement a new software product into someone's workflow. Matt, you got anything else?
No, I'm good. I'll tell you the biggest takeaway I've had though, right, is because all of my experience is sales led organizations. And I feel like, with maybe one or two small exceptions, that everything we've talked about on this conversation to become a world-class product-led organization can also, if implemented well into your sales-led company, help you become a better version of the sales-led company you already were, right? I think like the streamlined onboarding, the lessons hit, the deeper product analytics, the figuring out the value switch and the expansion revenue rhythms and the whole nine yards. I think there's so much to learn from what you're teaching, Wes, even if you're not a product-led company, even if you have no aspiration to be a product-led company. I think there's things in here that will just make you a better company, period, full stop. And I think that's a beautiful takeaway for the people listening to this episode, is like, don't set this down if you're not product-led, because there's a lot to learn here, regardless of your motion. So that's my big takeaway, man.
Yeah. And I think to wrap that up too, like something about where the market's headed, where B2B buyers are going, is like, through it ever before, B2B buyers would prefer to try before they buy, before they do this. Is like where people are headed. And if you want to compete long term, it's pretty hard to go against like neck and neck against a product-led company versus sales-led one, because the product-led one just has so much more efficiency. When you think of like, they can do a lot more with a fraction of the people. They can scale way easier. They can lower their costs versus you. They can have a better product than you, and all those different things. And so my kind of like final say is like, just don't wait. Don't wait too long, because somebody might, if you have a good market, just do the product-led version of that and take your lunch.
Yeah. I think to really reach your full potential as a SaaS company, you're going to have to be able to wield both tools. You need to have a sales team that have a great, well-timed conversation and have the handheld model down pat, and then your product's got to be fantastic. There's no way to really stress test a product and not using human intervention to get the client the result. And you can do both those things. And now we have the skill set, the team, the operation to solve with whatever solution is best for that problem. Like, we're in a really good spot. Wes, this has been a lot of fun. I feel like I'm looking forward to, you're going to actually speaking in our next SaaS Academy intensive in June. I'm really excited to spend some more time, get you in front of our clients. You just got a wealth of knowledge in this area, and really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us. Help me out. Yeah, man, help our users or listeners. I'm like so into product world. Help our users find you online. You said productled.com. Where else can they find you?
Yeah, no, that's the best place, productled.com. And then just find me on LinkedIn, Wes Bush.
Sweet. Amazing. All right, Wes, we'll talk real soon. Thanks so much for spending the time, man. Good chatting.
All right, this is great. Thanks.